All right, so we're going to keep this hopefully interactive and fairly informal. Honestly, we weren't sure what to expect today, so bear with us. TJ and I are paths, and I'll just spend a couple minutes on this, crossed originally. I was teaching social studies at Newark High School, local community school in Newark, Delaware. I was teaching TJ's younger brother. TJ ended up doing this research study, ended up coming in my class. We hit it off. Later, fast forward a little bit, he went in industry for a while. Then he came to Howard High, where I was the assistant principal. Then I left, became a principal. He eventually became the department chair in English Language Arts at Del Castle. And then he left Newcastle County Vo-Tech, went to Appoquinimink, but we stayed in touch, stayed very good friends. And unlike a lot of educators, we had a rule that we would talk about work. You know, there was always a rule at my lunch table originally is you can't talk about work. You can talk about sports, you want to talk about the Phillies, talk about the fine.
Talk about Fight Club.
Yeah, so, you know, in reality, we said, no, we're going through a lot of different things. I'm a principal at this point. He's a principal. We're both in turnaround environments. We both had very clear deadlines from the federal and state of what we needed to do in these schools. And we would go on these runs together. Then one day I just took out my phone and was like, we should start like writing some of this stuff down. That led to us starting a blog. It really was cathartic at first. It wasn't designed for anything beyond us thinking together, you know, sharing ideas. We can resolve some of the conflicts we're experiencing in a better way. And why not share that with just a broader community? So our whole intent has always been to write and spread and really give knowledge free out into the world. And it's paid off in different ways. We now, I guess it's been 9 years since we started that. We just wrapped up our 6th book. We've written just us two together. We've written with our very good friend, Principal L, who we've have 3 books with L, and then just wrapped up a book with Connie Hamilton and Todd Whitaker. That was a real joy writing with Todd. He's a character and a half. So here we are. And again, like I started, you know, we are focused now a lot on, you know, this great profession, what we think is one of the best professions out there, but how do we continue to attract people into this profession? And then once we're here in this profession, how do we keep them? We know our most vulnerable teachers are our new teachers and our best teachers. And we know that 1 to 5 years is critical. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what I just mentioned about is challenges. Teacher retention is a major challenge. You would, Leilani, just mentioned just the number of vacancies. Also, what we don't talk about as much is just other challenges we're facing. We talked today already about safety and security in our schools. We talked about making sure that our teachers that we do have are highly qualified, but we also have just kids coming to us every day that we know just need love and support. Not only do they need education, but they need to feel like they belong. And I would say that cry for love and support is just as loud as that cry for education. And as the best educators know, they balance that very, very well.
Yeah, I also think that in that challenge bucket is what are we meant to do and what are we going to do in the future? I mean, you talked about doing a survey to the community and them not feeding us back what it is that we know how to do. I think that's so critical because we can't just continue to do what we've always done despite the data, or else that just wouldn't be fair to our stakeholders. We have 3 numbers here on the board. We want you to tell us what these numbers represent as data points, as research in the field. And this is very recent research. So fair game for anybody. Let's start with 44,652. Who would like to tell us?
That's not bad. 44,000 isn't bad at all.
Number of graduating teachers?
No, we wish that number was 44,000. I don't. Vacancies. So 44,652 represents vacancies in the field right now. How about?
I think it's much higher.
It's probably higher. It could be higher, but this is the recent numbers that we found. 270,000, and this might actually be closer to what you're talking about. Why that number is higher? 270,000. Who would like to take a crack at that?
Turnover?
Not quite.
Are we still talking teachers?
It could be
Not
weird.
students.
Anything's fair game.
Yeah.
Like projected need in a time period.
15, 30 years.
Graduation.
This is the number of unqualified people we have in front of kids.
Well, unqualified meaning
Not certified teachers.
In what states?
The whole country.
There are states that don't allow non-certifieds at all.
Well, we have a state that doesn't allow non-certifieds at all, but we have plenty of non-certified people in front of kids.
Well, there you go. Shh, don't tell them.
Don't tell anybody, but somebody's got to be in there.
right.
Long-term subs.
Long-term subs,
Professional license.
people who aren't certified in that subject matter, a paraprofessional, good people, but they're not certified to teach that subject. How about 86%?
Planning to leave in the next year?
Don't last 5 years. Leave before 5 years? No.
86% of school districts say they are at a deficit with their teachers. 86% report we need people now.
And then,
Yeah.
is there any data that you've found about teachers, like in college right now, studying to be teachers?
The data there, I don't know the numbers offhand, but it's not good. In fact, in our area, in our region, Pennsylvania used to be a nice pipeline into New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, because there were so many teacher colleges in Pennsylvania, and many of them have closed. They've literally shut down programming. And we have that in Delaware where like actual colleges and universities have closed certain departments of their education or just don't offer education department anymore because so few people are going into it, they can't sustain it.
We do like to mention, though, this is not new. People like to think this is a new problem in education. Since 1976, the trajectory of individuals going into the profession has declined. So it's just become now a crisis. And so throughout the decades, less and less people have come in, but now that people can go into different professions that are very appealing for multiple reasons, whether it's pay, whether it's working remote, flexibility in schedules, those are the things that really affect teachers and affect the profession. People don't think about it, but TJ and I always talk about, you're tied to the buses, right? You're tied to when the bus gets to you in the morning and when it leaves. And there's really not a lot of flexibility. Well, if the dentist's office closes at 4, that's a problem. And I think that's a lot of problem for a lot of people when they're starting to think, wow, this world offers me quite a bit more. So let's look at different professions. Plus, right now, if you're going into education, the narrative, which we'll talk more about, around education is typically negative. But we would also contend that's always been the case since the 1950s. That, if you want to talk about the American way is to suggest that things are not well, and I have an answer for it. Whether or not they do is debatable. But that has happened. Time Life magazine, 1950s, had a Russian student, a Chicago student, and said, look where we're heading. Look how better off this Russian student is. The proof is in the pudding on who we educate, how well we educate, that we really try. And we all have work to do. No one is suggesting that this is perfect. But what we are suggesting is we do live in a place that we do work hard to educate all students. And that is significantly different.
Yeah, we believe the problem is actually fixable. It's not without its huge boulders, right? Structural issues we were talking about before. Structural issues for students and structural issues for teachers. But we can make a dent in these issues and bring it back. Here's what it feels like, though, right? Right? And I was thinking of you when this slide came up because you didn't sit down before you filled that coffee cup. And I think we all feel that way. There's work to do. It's good work. We need more people to do it. And so we've got to fix that from the inside. We're probably not going to get external forces that are going to do anything but make it worse on us or hold us more accountable. Fine. But it's internally where we can fix these problems, and we're going to talk about that today. And the three things that we've brought to the forefront in some of our literature, some of our books, and in many of our talks, and we could dive into each one of these deeper. Actually, we've done 2-day institutes on any one of these three topics and more. Today, we're going to briefly touch on celebrating and praising our teams, our teachers, our people, controlling the narrative, which we have the ability to do from the inside, and protecting our time, the time of the teacher, the time of the principal, the time of the superintendent. That's so valuable to get the work done that we tend to allow to go in different directions. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each one of these.
So celebrate and praise. We want to focus on this because there is a lot of work that's being done in our schools that are incredible. It gets overshadowed quickly, but this is where, as a school community, the community of learners and the educators in the building really can start to harness the power of positive praise. And we want to be very clear. We're not talking about anything superficial. We are referring to, very specific ways to celebrate staff, celebrate students for doing exceptional things or even trying, taking risks. So defining celebration and praise is critical. What we are not talking about is just good old celebrations for birthdays, that's great, but that should be to build someone's, for them to just feel as a part of that school community. That's not building their strength as an educator, and that's not building a student's connectivity with the school. The celebration and praise we're referring to does those things. It makes them better teachers, and it makes them students who want to come to school through the celebration and praise we're referring to.
So, but Dr. Jones, do you feel like we weren't doing that before? Were people just being mean to people?
No, it's the absence. Go ahead, TJ.
The research on that is really clear. 70% of managers say they praise and celebrate their people. 80% of the people, and that's an updated number from when we did our original research, 80% of people don't feel that they're celebrated and praised. It's not that we're not doing it or that we're not trying to do it or that we're not thinking that we're doing it. It's that we're not doing it well. And we're going to teach you a model today that's based on neuroscience and behavioral psychology to help you to be able to do it well. And it works. It works. Not only does it work in the research, but it works in practical application. And by the time we're done with the model, you can use it today. And I challenge anybody to use it even in a text message to a spouse, to a child, to a friend, to a peer, to a colleague, and especially if you're a supervisor.
And we would also suggest, to your question as well, it's the absence of sometimes. It doesn't have to be or, right? It's not that we weren't necessarily criticizing people. In fact, I would just say it's the opposite. Nothing was being said. And then people are left to their own devices to think, all right, well, how well am I doing? What we're referring to with celebration as praise is how are you consistently and pervasively incorporating it into your work. So think about professional learning. Most of us in this region of the country have started school. We're a month and a half in. We've had probably 2 to 5 days of professional learning. The question would then be, in walkthroughs that are conducted by administrators or PLCs that have had, time to really reflect and think about that professional learning, how much celebration and praise has been documented based on that professional learning? So if we went through something we want to see our teachers do, formative assessments, we're buckling down on formative assessments. Have we then tailored our walkthrough tool designed to look for formative assessments? Are we anchoring our work in our focus. And that alignment is typically off. Now, the celebration and praise, when I said earlier about like the risk taking, the reason is people may not get it right. We want them to try. We share this with students all the time. No, try. Don't be afraid. Really take a step forward. We need that same attitude towards our staff. And that's where the celebration and praise really starts to gather momentum, because then we're all focused on the things that we're trying to achieve that school year. And when you have that alignment, people are then more apt to even try it and say, all right, I'll give it a shot. Instead of looking, oh no, Dr. Jones is in my classroom, I got to do this. That's not what we're looking for. You know, our classrooms should be labs of learning, not finished products. And that finished product mentality is really what's stopping us from growing in our schools.
And taking it just one step further to underscore some of the things that Dr. Jones was just saying, we have the assistant principal here. You're at a PLC. You have an instructional coach who is doing some professional learning for teachers at a faculty meeting. It's a race. It's a race. Because what we know about one and done PD is typically we love the learning part of it and we never apply it. The race is to go out and find people who are taking a risk to try something new, even if they don't do it well, and to find the people who are doing it well. Those two things. We're looking for those two things right away, and praise and celebrate. Praise and celebrate the risk taking. I tried something new. Praise and celebrate the accuracy and the precision that somebody did with it. Typically, though, we might not even be in the room as administrators and supervisors when the teachers are learning. So there's a critical need for us to understand how this works. We've got to be in the room. We've got to learn alongside of people. And then we have to have a race to find out who's doing it with precision and accuracy and who is trying something new to get them to continue to do that. So praise, again, is the most misunderstood and underutilized form of feedback. And here's the model that we developed based, again, on the neuroscience and behavioral psychology. What we're trying to do with praise is we're trying to get people to repeat their behavior and or feel pride in their work. Those are two really important things. Repeat the behavior of risk-taking or precision and accuracy, or feel really good about your work. And that's something that's missing from many workplaces. So this is the way the formula works. It's 4 parts. We start with a praise statement. That's the great job. We typically end there. Great job. Don't say great job to your teachers, because the minute you say great job to a teacher, they're going to say great job with what? I've been working in here all day, doing all kinds of things, and you're telling me great job, and I don't even know what the great job is for. And typically, that's when the teacher starts to think, you don't even know what you're looking at. Right? And that's something that teachers will commonly think about principals and assistant principals, whether we like it or not. It's true. So we start with the great job with, and then we want to be specific. Dr. Jones mentioned formative assessments, so I'll continue with that example. Great job with the new formative assessments that we learned in our faculty meeting just recently. So now I'm into my race. But I got to provide a rationale, because if I'm reinforcing this behavior, and when I'm reinforcing it with specificity, that's the first part, and that's a good part to have. You're reinforcing a specific behavior, but that's going to get us compliance. What we want is empowerment. So we want to tell, why are those formative assessments so important? It's so important for us to collect data. So great job using the formative assessments that we just learned in our faculty meeting. It's so important for us to have the data to understand what students know and can do, and for us to look at that data together in our PLCs. That's my rationale, and I'm going to end by closing the loop by saying I really appreciate that you used those formative assessments today. Why do I close the loop? Because by the time you are specific and you use a praise statement and you tell people the rationale, the average person is starting to go, what did I do wrong? And so it's just the way our brains are wired. Our brains are wired to find problems. Humans wouldn't be alive today if we didn't have that aspect of our brain. We're really good at that. But what we need to get better at is elevating, lifting, and supporting people through praise. So we close the loop by saying, I really appreciate that, or really well done today. That's how the model works. It's 4 parts. You can check yourself on the 4 parts, and it works.
You drill it? It seems like this would have to be drilled.
Yes.
You'd have to drill it.
All
We
the
drill
time.
it. We work with school districts all across the country, and you can't imagine. it's still mind-boggling to me today to teach the 4-part model and to go into classrooms. We just taught you the 4-part model. You go into classrooms and you use 2 out of the 4 parts or 3 out of the 4 parts. And so we do drill it. We drill it, we practice it with people, we practice it in walkthroughs, in knee to knees. It works verbally, it works in written form. And again, we're trying to get repeated behaviors, replicated behaviors, pride in our people, feeling good about their work. Pride is up on the wall in this room, right? We want people to feel good about their work, and we're only doing it for 2 reasons. You tried something new, or you did something awesome. And we don't want to mix those up, right? So again, we can do a whole day's institute just on this because we've got to drill it. And that's a really good point and a really good question.
So the second area we're really trying to focus on keeping our teachers and attracting new teachers is protect their time. The most important space in any school is the classroom. Although if you poll teachers, Suzanne's in the room with us now, I'm sure a lot of teachers feel like that is not the case, that everything is competing classroom time, or there's constant interruptions. And as a superintendent, I'm very sensitive to it. I'm sure if we even polled some of my own teachers, they say, Joe, that's not how we feel this year. Why? Because there's just a host of initiatives that roll out. Some are our own initiatives that we feel are just good for kids, good for our school, good for our district, and ultimately our community. But there's also a lot of initiatives from the state and the federal level that we have to contend with as well, that compete for time. So doing your best to protect teachers' time to do what they do best, which is to be in front of students, teaching them, is where the focus needs to be. And to emphasize this, we often draw this notion that just 2 degrees difference makes really a drastic change. Now, we don't like to be alarmists, and I'm certainly not sharing this tragedy to overemphasize the need to protect teachers' time. But years ago, there was Air New Zealand Flight 901. A lot of people are not familiar with this flight because it happened so long ago. However, this is a tragedy that took the lives of 237 passengers, 20 crew members, and it was a flight over Antarctica that literally back, I guess this is in the 70s, people were, amazed at Antarctica, so they would do 11-hour straight flights, and they would be able to see Antarctica. The plane would descend very low, so people could go and look and see what's going on. And the idea was get a glimpse of this beautiful part of our world that most likely could never see. Well, the coordinates changed. The pilots didn't know. They were just slightly off. And it took them right into Mount Erebus. And they had no clue because they descended the plane so low so people could get a good look. Just because this 2 degrees off, it took them off course roughly 37 miles. In that 37 miles, they went right into a mountain. And so, again, I don't share a tragedy to become alarmist, but when we're not protecting our teachers' time and giving them the resources and support they need to, educate our students, it's no wonder our kids aren't learning. So this has to be the call, that just a slight shift can take us very much off course and lead to disastrous effects. And that's what we see all the time in our schools, that we constantly pull on our teachers to do things above and beyond that aren't related to the classroom. And we got to continue as leaders, especially, protect them so they can do what's best, which is be with children and educate our children. And this is what really makes the difference in schools. And when teachers have that purpose and they feel that purpose, the other challenges associated with education are eclipsed. But when we don't give them that purpose and we don't protect them, those challenges are magnified. And that's the toxicity that can slowly happen in a school culture that we got to constantly fight against. But the best way to do it is simply protect them. Protect them from all of the distractions that can occur and let them focus on their students.
And so we have to imagine this time and reimagine what school looks like to protect teachers' time. their protected time for instruction, for planning, and for collaboration with their peers. What we know from a structural problem is that teachers need more time in school without kids. But even what we have now in terms of planning periods and lunches is being taken away from them. And so we've got to get back to a time where we can protect that internally and reimagine a time where teachers have more planning and more collaboration time that's not with kids. And so how can we do that as school leaders with our schedule, with our school day, and to also protect the time that they do have? Because the average teacher will tell you, I don't even get the time that I'm supposed to get, let alone what I need to do my job. And the last thing we're going to talk about is controlling the narrative that we need to do on the inside here in terms of the message that we're sending to the external world. And we'll be quick with you on this one today.
So there's already a narrative around public education in the United States. We hear this all the time. It's an election season, so we hear it more. And I would contend there's tremendous things going on in every school. And I don't want to suggest on any level that I'm Pollyanna or I'm not a realist. I don't look at my garden and just close my eyes and say, no weeds, no weeds, no weeds, when there's weeds everywhere. However, there are tremendous things that go on that we need to celebrate. And we do this, but it typically falls in the most common of patterns. Athletics, the big extracurriculars, band, big award ceremonies. But what about the child that literally kept pushing, and then finally solved that math equation? My wife's a 4th grade special education teacher. She has stories every day where a child just tried, and when they got it, there's no greater feeling. And they still love little scratch and sniff stickers. Who thought? But they love them.
We all do.
They love them. So it is these things that's what we need to remind the greater community about. Because what they see are test scores and test scores alone. And when those test scores and those tests don't mean anything to a student, especially a teenager, they don't take it serious. They're not going to focus. So again, I'm not suggesting that we don't have our work to do. I'm very much grounded in all of the work that needs to be accomplished in our schools. And I think that if we're really educating our students to compete in this world, we got to take it very serious. But there are things happening each and every day that I think if you haven't been in a school for a while, you have no idea is happening.
And so we just highlight some of the things, the mental images that people have of schools, the decrepit school, the school that needs to be knocked down. And like Dr. Jones said, there's definitely schools that need to be remodeled.
It's
Well, there it is.
There you go.
There it is, right?
It is.
This is what we want our schools to look like, and this is what many schools look like. I mean, I had the fortune of building schools in my former role, and we build schools to look like this. This is what we think kids are doing in the classroom, and if this is the case, we need to turn it around and make it fun. And we do that through a lot of the tools that we give teachers to save their time, to protect their time, but also to control the narrative. And so I think we're going to end here today with a quote about amplifying positive stories, and then tell you just a little bit more about us. We do develop school and district leaders across the country. We're going to go today and do an induction program. In Delaware, you can't be an administrator unless you come through our program. And then also just empowering, retaining talented staff, keynotes to your teachers, back to school events is something that we typically see this time of year. Elevating and celebrating best practices through the work that we've shared in many of our books. And then also doing 1- and 2-day institutes with administrators in school districts to help them learn these practices and use these practices, and then do some coaching and masterminds with them to make sure that it's going well. You can get our resources here. We do a blog and a podcast, and that comes to you free in a newsletter. So we'll share that with you. And thanks for the opportunity to present today.
Let's go give these guys a hand. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being with me.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Well, this will go up online.